Welcome to episode 176 of the Left Behind Game Club. This week, we play Until Dawn. Let's get right into it.
You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club.
Welcome to the Left Behind Game Club, our never-ending attempt to make sure that no game is left behind. I'm your host, Jacob McCourt, and today I have one girlfriend with me. Her name is Jessica. Hello, Jessica Fantauzzo.
Hi.
You haven't been on the show in a hot minute.
It has been several hot minutes.
It has been years.
Several thousand hot minutes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So tell me, do you remember what shows you were on?
Soma.
Yep, Broken Age.
Broken Age.
And Florence.
And
That's
I think one Night in the Woods.
Night in the Woods. So this is your fifth appearance. Welcome back.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Today we're playing a spooky one.
A spooky game.
One that you were like, let's play this video game.
I don't know. Is spooky the right word?
Can't be?
I don't know.
Okay, well, let's get into it and talk about Until Dawn. It's a video game developed by Supermassive Games and published by Sony Computer Entertainment, released originally on the PS4 in August of 2015. We start the show, like all of our shows, with the fast pitch, a one-sentence pitch about the video game we are about to play. Can I go first on this one?
Please.
Why is Hayden Panettiere in a towel the whole time?
Is that your whole pitch?
That's it. That's my whole pitch.
Cool.
Go ahead. Yours is probably going to be better.
Mine's a little spoilery. Is that okay?
Let's keep it light spoilers.
Gentle
for now.
spoilers.
Yes, that's great.
Ambiguous spoilers.
Yes, for an 8-year-old game, that's fine.
Yeah, right? We're all... This is a safe space.
Yep.
My pitch is Punked the Lost Seasons.
Okay.
You get it?
I do. Light spoiler. Very good. Folks will know exactly what we're talking about later in the show. So I guess I need to know, before we dive in and talk about this game specifically, what your experience is like with games like this, and then specifically games made by Supermassive. You've played The Quarry, right?
I have played The Quarry.
Did you like The Quarry?
I did like The Quarry. The Quarry was definitely, like, in comparison, probably, like, right at the edge of my comfort level.
Okay.
Of, like...
From a spooky perspective?
From, like, I physically cannot use the controller and proceed.
I mean, you're a gamer.
Is that a question?
I had an inflection on there that was not meant. You're a gamer.
Sure.
Yeah, you can game.
I game.
And you played it with someone else, like in co-op, right?
I played The Quarry with, it was 3 of us co-op.
Okay.
Yeah.
You and your brother?
Me and my brothers, and my dad played for a very hot minute before I think he was like, this is not for me.
Have you played other games like this?
I mean, I've definitely played some games in the horror genre.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I think, did we podcast about PT?
Oh, we might have also.
I think
done
we
that
maybe
one.
podcasted about PT.
So maybe it's your 6th time on the show. There you go. Yeah.
I'm so memorable.
Try and find PT now. You can't.
So yeah, I mean, I think the closest, obviously, like for me, is within like the Supermassive family of having played The Quarry first, and then now
we played Hidden Agenda too.
I honestly, I'll say it. The Hidden Agenda bored me so much, I don't remember it.
Wow. Okay. I feel like I'm like the biggest fan of Hidden Agenda out there, and I played it once, and it was like years and years and years ago.
I was so bored, I don't remember it.
It's like a Supermassive game, but it had a card thing. It was part of Sony's like PlayLink initiative back on the PlayStation 4, where like you would use your phone to have cards that you would keep secret from other players that you could play to like cause conflict within your team, which was interesting. But I think I've played a little bit more. I've played The Quarry, which I played after you. This is my 2nd time through Until Dawn. It's your 1st time through Until Dawn.
Correct.
And I have played all of the Dark Pictures anthology games.
Oh, yeah. Oh, see, bad memory.
You've not played all of them, though.
No, but I've seen a little bit of Man of Medan.
Yep.
And we played The Devil Inside, The Devil in Me, The Devil Inside Me.
The Devil in Me, yep.
That's probably like my resume.
Okay. You've played, I guess, the ones that are not the greatest in my opinion. Like
my spooky resume, yeah.
It's a good spooky resume.
It's not a bad one.
They're not bad, but I think the middle two are better. But again,
I think I've played the top hits.
You've played a lot of good spooky games.
Right?
This is your first time in Until Dawn. What did you know about this one before you started playing?
Hayden Panettiere.
Great. Excellent. Well done. Did you know Rami Malek was in it?
I did know he was in it. I didn't know in what context. Like, I didn't realize that he would be playing a high schooler as a grown man, which I guess they all do. Which I guess is really the trope.
Yeah,
right?
it's normal.
So that makes sense. But I didn't know plot. I didn't know I didn't know beyond that.
Okay. A few notes about this one compared to The Quarry. This one is strictly single player because this is really like one of the first real projects that Supermassive really got to do on their own. They did like Killzone HD for PS3. They did some DLC for Little Big Planet 2. And then they worked on Start the Party on PlayStation 3, which was a Move title, if you remember PlayStation Move. But this is like their real first game. And I guess I want to know, off the top, what'd you think? High level.
Again, I don't know if spooky is the right term.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, I consider, like, PT, spooky.
Yep.
Right? Soma, spooky. It's Five Nights.
Yep.
Spooky.
Yep.
Nancy Drew, spooky. Devil in Me, maybe a little bit to a degree, but like, I didn't find, like, I don't know that spooky is the right word.
And Devil in Me is almost more like, it's not Saw. I don't want to give it that. But it's closer to a Saw movie because there's like the tiniest bit of gore porn in it.
There's the tiniest bit of gore porn in Until Dawn as well.
Yeah. But it's not spooky, but did you like it?
I did like it.
Okay.
I did like it. It felt like, without spoilers, like kind of two different games.
Okay.
Plot-wise.
Okay.
Right? Because they're sort of like the initial twist and then like not everything is not as it seems. The one thing that kind of held me back the biggest was probably the controls.
Okay.
Like, it was definitely very limiting where like you want to explore and you want to have free reign and you don't. And I think, I mean, there's pros and cons to that, right? Like, they were able to create some really beautiful like horror movie cinematography like shots, right? Of like seeing the character through other elements in the room or like low angles in the hallway or like stuff like that like you wouldn't have if you didn't have that restriction. But that took away a little bit of the freeness to me.
It very much has like the Resident Evil, the old school Resident Evil camera for a lot of it, where you will walk your character, and again, we'll explain sort of what the gameplay is here too, where you'll walk your character through the environment, and at a certain point, when you get to the edge of the environment, it'll switch the camera angle, but not in a way that you necessarily
Not
know.
in a pleasant way.
Not in a pleasant way at times, where it very much is just like, cool, it's cinematic in that we're going to be behind your character for this hallway, you take a right down another hallway, and then maybe it's actually from the other perspective from the end of the hall. So it's a bit jarring at first to get used to, but I think really this is a very much like Telltale games back in the day, where I guess I'd call it an adventure game that is very focused on the story between characters. And in this specific game, not only the story between the characters, but some of the things that are happening that are spooky around them, and having to survive the night until dawn. Hence the name.
Like, spooky's just not, it's, murder.
It's murder. Okay. The game starts with...
It's
homicide. There's a group of characters. They're high schoolers. They're all friends. They go to a cottage, and it sort of this cottage scene sets up this friend group in a really awful way. Go ahead.
I mean, they go to a isolated, rich mansion in the wilderness.
Yes. And are all high school kids, and they're all celebrating, and that sets up the set of characters that are going to be part of this game. Who are the characters that you immediately were like, oh, I'm gravitated towards this character?
Oh, I mean,
none of them I know, but
you know my answer.
Yeah.
I guess it's the other thing, actually. That's probably my other biggest low point of the game is, I mean, tropes, stereotypes, whatever you want to call it, like, that's fine. I found everybody so unlikable.
But unlikable on purpose, or unlikable because they tried to make likable characters and fell short? Because I actually think it was deliberate.
You think they were deliberately made to be awful?
Yeah.
Well, then everyone can die.
Well, I mean, over the course of the game, I think a lot of these characters you end up getting more acquainted with them, and some of them, maybe one or two of them, you actually don't completely hate by the end of it. But I think it's fair when you say, like, hey, a lot of these characters are unlikable, that a lot of these characters are unlikable.
I think that's a mistake, though, right? Because especially in a game like this where you're making decisions and you're trying to keep everybody alive, and you're not rooting for the character that you're trying to keep alive, maybe that's just me, but I felt like there was some dissonance, right?
Okay.
Like when you're playing and it's like, I really don't care if this person falls into a sawmill. It's probably what they deserve.
The cottage is owned by the Washington family. Mansion. Josh Washington, played by Rami Malek. And then there are twins or sisters, Hannah Washington and Beth Washington. The three of them sort of own it. And there's a series of other characters. Some of them played by, we've mentioned some pretty prominent characters. They will come in later, but we'll just slowly touch on them here. We've got Ash, who's sort of like the nerdy chick. We've got Chris, who's also a nerd and
boy nerd.
He's a boy nerd. We've got Emily, who's like a brash fashionista.
She's a brash fashionista. She's like the mean girl, like clique leader, queen bee.
Jess, who's a party girl. She's played by Megan. Oh man, I want to get this. She's played by Megan Martin, who's been in like several like Disney Channel and the like sort of series over time. We've got Matt, played by Jordan Fisher, who's the jock.
Really like before the Jordan Fisher Renaissance.
Yes, exactly.
Pre-Jordan Fisher Renaissance.
This game came out in 2015, so like this is before like Dear Evan Hansen, even like Jordan Fisher, before Jordan Fisher is a streamer as well. This is sort of, his, I don't want to say his first real thing, but
fact check.
Yeah, fact check me, I guess. Mike, who is the ladies' man. And then
the ladies' man.
How else
it's so interesting that that's your perspective on it. Of like,
I can't call every character a jerk here.
They are though. Yeah. I mean, he's like the cool like football captain, alpha high schooler.
Yeah, because Matt has a Letterman jacket
with enormous biceps.
He's an adult, but as a teen,
jacked. And
then Sam, who is played by Hayden Panettiere, and she's almost like the mediator for the group. She's almost like the girl next door mediator. I want to say she's like almost the player's analog in the game who questions a lot, but that's at least how she was almost the most likable of the group.
She's definitely a bit of a foil to all of the other like typical high school behavior.
And the thing that happens in the prologue, which is sort of a signature for a lot of Supermassive games, where they give you a prologue where they end up killing some of the characters off. Spoilers, I guess, for every Supermassive game, but that's sort of how it goes, where like they teach you the game, where there's little consequence, because regardless of how you do, there's usually someone that will die. And in this case, it is both Hannah and Beth who run away in the woods, are chased by something, fall off a cliff, and are lost and not found in a snowy, blistery, wintry night. Fair?
I mean, you're leaving out the cause.
Okay. Do you want to explain the cause of the mean teens and what they do?
No, I want to hear you explain it.
So I think Beth, it's Hannah. Hannah ends up getting lured into a bedroom with Mike, who's sort of a jerk, and the whole group plays a trick on her. They know that she's crushing on Mike really hard, and they essentially put her in this position where, Mike, tries to seduce her, and they're in this bedroom, and she's like obviously very, delicate and new at this, and the face you're making, I wish podcast people could see it, but in essence, everyone is sitting like in a closet ready to record her like be dorky and bad and nervous in the bedroom, and they're just really mean about it. Would you like to fill in the lines there or fill in the blanks?
No.
We're just gonna go with that.
I feel like that there's a plot of some like teen comedy from the 2000s or like late 90s. Like it's almost like I don't know. Was there like a moment in like She's All That at the end where they're like, ha ha ha, we were all in it.
What if Amanda Bynes was in like Scream?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like 2000s era
Like
Amanda Bynes.
you're explaining it like a funny like, oh, like you guys got me. But
It's awful.
I feel like it's pretty cruel what they do.
Yeah, it's very awful.
Like they're there with like their phones and recording, and it's basically like, would we like something like, I don't know.
It's bullying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bullying in like the most simple definition.
Yeah.
So not only does Hannah, who's gone through this really terrible thing, running through the woods, her sister tries to run after her. Both of them end up passing. And then that's when the game goes to a year later, when Josh sort of organizes a reunion for everyone, based on the disappearances and presumed death of the Washington sisters back at the cottage, just for them to sort of like have a good time, blow off some steam, etc. The one thing I do want to cover before we talk about the story of the game and how it goes is we haven't set up one of the gameplay sections that you get a lot, which is the psychiatry sections. Is that what you expected when you came into Until Dawn, to have these psychiatry sections that like really break up the story in the game?
Well, I mean, the quarry was the same way with a different character, and I knew from playing that with people who had also played Until Dawn that was a trademark of Supermassive games. So I was expecting it. It does function in a little bit of a different way than the quarry, where you're sort of probed on a series of questions, and those questions have implications on the gameplay and what you're going to experience.
What are some examples of those questions?
So I think the section that you had missed, so I don't even know if you remember this, but you're going through a booklet of basically drawings, and he's asking you what scares you the most. So you've got like scarecrow versus clown. So like I sort of tried to like reverse psychology it when I went through it, and I was like, clowns, don't scare me. And I think it actually does come to like, I think it actually does affect what you see. So like I don't know, like I remember that there was a section where like you could choose needles or you could choose something else, and I think if you choose the needle, like you do actually come like, you have to interact with a needle in some way at some point in the game.
And there are a few other games that do something like that. There's Silent Hill Shattered Memories, which is a PS2 and Wii game that sort of is a reimagining of the first game and has a psychiatrist or some sort of psychotherapist that asks you a bunch of questions, and based on your questions, it affects what the monster design looks like, but very much like that. Like these questions, and there's a bunch of them. There's even sometimes where the doctor will ask you stuff like, which one of the characters do you hate the most?
Everyone.
But we ended up having to rank everyone, but
we did, yeah.
That stuff affects the game itself. Peter Stormare plays the doctor, and I think does a great job for the role that he's given. Like very much to play the psychiatrist, almost like the curator in all of the Dark Pictures games, who just sort of like pulls you out of it to be like, something's happening.
I think everyone on the whole, performance-wise, probably like were like they were like a notch better than the material given.
Yeah.
Right? I think towards the end, like the psychiatry stuff starts to get like, I don't know, maybe like a level worse in terms of like quality.
For reasons.
For reasons, and maybe not reasons. I don't know. But no, so I was expecting it. I think the way that it played, like how it affected the game, that was different than how it does in the quarry. And then I think the entanglement with the story, which I guess is also true at the quarry. But that's an interesting kind of angle as well.
Okay, I think at this point, because this is a very story-heavy game, it's probably best if we, declare that this is the spoiler wall, where if you are interested in Until Dawn, which at this point is now a 7 or 8 year old game at the time of recording, you may want to pause this, play the game, or at least watch maybe some walkthroughs and then come back, because right now we are going to now spoil the entirety of the rest of the game. This is your warning. 3, 2, 1. Let's talk about Until Dawn. I don't know where to start with this one, because I don't think we should go beat by beat on it, but I think what I'd love to do is sort of talk about the game's maybe 3 acts, if you will, because I think it's sort of split up that way, where after the prologue, the first act is sort of setting up, the you call it a mansion, but the cottage and what they're going to do.
It's like the only access is by like remote cable car, and there's like a weird, like, deep basement. Like, it is not a cottage.
I'm gonna look this up, but I think we're in Canada for this.
I feel like, for reasons we will talk about later, I think we can almost certainly put it in Canada.
Yeah.
So after the prologue, right?
Yep.
It's the 1 year anniversary, more or less, of Beth and Hannah's disappearance. And Josh has invited the same group of awful teenagers.
They're just teenagers.
No, they're awful teenagers. Okay. All of them back to this mansion, and you start playing through everybody arriving and all of the characters interacting with each other again, and hijinks ensue.
The first set of hijinks really start happening when weird things start happening in the actual house itself. So
in that first section, for whatever reason, it's not really explained, but like once you get to the end, you're kind of like, okay, I get why. They, Chris, Ashley, and Josh dig up a Ouija board, and they are playing around with the board, and everybody claims to not be controlling it, and they sort of act like they've summoned this, like the spirit of, I think it's Hannah at that time, who claims who gives them like a ominous message. That's the spookiest thing. And then Sam and Josh are in the basement. Right.
Where they're trying to get the heat or the power back on because they haven't been to the cottage since the incident happened.
He's trying to kick the generator up.
Yeah, and that's when
and then everyone splits up, as they do in horror movies.
Yeah, because that's the best thing to do when you're in a horror movie is to split up.
Mike and Jess take a 7-hour trek to the other cottage because of infighting.
Yeah, they're sent to because there's not enough room in this friggin' megament because of infighting.
There's room, but remember Jess and Emily.
They want to go get intimate.
Emily is Mike's ex-girlfriend.
Yep.
So they start yelling, and Josh pulls the enough, you guys.
Yep.
This isn't what I want. I'm here for everyone, which is just none of it makes sense from the get-go. But
and I mean, Matt, even you're able to peer in on some of that tension between Mike and Emily from afar. So there's also that dynamic of like that foursome of people just having a lot of strife between them. Good point. So they go
teenage drama.
They go to like be intimate together at a what seemed like a shack on the other side of the city because it takes them forever to get there.
Lots of walking. And how do Matt and Emily get out there? How do Matt and Emily get out there? Oh, I remember. So Emily, being the brat that she is, claims that she left her bag. So Matt and Emily also leave, and they go walk back towards the like bridge entrance,
the ski lift,
and hijinks ensue.
Yeah. So at that point, when Mike and Jessica get to the cottage or the shack, they start to hear noises, and Jessica is basically torn out of this shack through the window and just disappears. And Matt and Emily start to see some things that are a little off the wall, and then they decide that they want to call for help. And is that when they go up to the tower, or is that later?
I think that's a little bit later, but that's sort of their general path. I think like Matt and Emily are kind of like secondary.
Sure, yeah.
They felt like they maybe have a little bit less screen time than maybe like Matt.
Hayden Panettiere's character.
Or sorry, Mike. Mike sort of steals the show for the middle part of the game.
Yeah. He does all the things from the sound of it.
Yeah.
So they go to the radio tower because they sense there's problem to try and call something. The radio tower collapses. They end up in a mine, and then most of the group ends up either at the cottage, just trying to figure out what the heck is going on around them, or at a sanatorium that's attached to the property. Why is there a sanatorium attached to this?
Very good question.
And again, without getting into the super nitty gritty details, that's when like someone starts to pick off and come after people, right?
Well, at this point, nobody's really picked off except for Jess. So Jess goes early, and then you don't really see Jess until the end of the game. or like closer to like this, you know, the 2/3 mark of the game. But somebody is definitely chasing and doing not great things to the rest of the group.
Yeah, and we soon discover that it's a masked man who is sort of coming after most of the folks in the cottage. Your Chris's, your Ashley, your Sam and
back
Josh.
to your pitch for the game.
Exactly. There's someone in the cottage basically, and we find out it's like this masked man who's got a clown mask on, at least in our playthrough, clown mask on, which is sort of symbolic of Until Dawn. Did you know there's a VR game for Until Dawn?
Oh, no, thank you.
Yeah, there's like a rail shooter where you're on a roller coaster.
Oh, I did know that. Yeah. I think we played a little bit of it.
Which has like basically nothing to do. I think it's a pack-in for the PSVR that we have.
Yeah, I think we've played a little bit of it.
It's not
great.
Fine. It's barely a game.
I wonder what our mask would have been had I chosen not clowns. Would he have been a scarecrow?
I'll look it up and see if there are different designs after the fact. But this masked man starts chasing after everyone, and exactly as I said, like including Hayden Panettiere in the bathtub, and he has like a gas mask and what I presume to be like laughing gas to try and knock people out, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, again, these teenagers are awful. She and just like, and I don't mean to be taking the like psycho side, but here I go. She's taking a bath with headphones in.
Yeah.
For like 3 hours while everybody else is getting chased.
Yeah.
And she's just hanging out in the jacuzzi.
But also, like, when you're there to be with your friends, you decide that you're just going to take like a 3-hour jacuzzi.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I guess that's asking for trouble.
Kind of.
We find out that Josh has been captured. And at that point, Ashley's been captured as well. There's a scene that sort of sets up one of the first deaths, quote unquote, in the game, where Chris, who's sort of the male nerd, is staring at Ashley and Josh. Josh is also Chris's best friend. They're like pinned up by the psycho by their arms, and there's a saw in the middle of the room that, you know, he essentially has to pick one person to save, and he can't save both. And regardless of your choice, you know, Josh sort of eats it.
And that was actually, speaking of Saw, like that was a very Saw moment.
Yes, it was.
Like down to the like distorted, you know, audio playing, saying like, "Hello, Chris. Like you have a decision to make.
He's basically Jigsaw.
Live or die." Yeah, he's
live or die. Make your choice.
Make your choice. He's basically Jigsaw at that point in time. Like not very imaginative.
Yeah. So Josh, like, at least in, I mean, for reasons.
4 out of 10 murder.
Do you find yourself playing older games and wishing that there were new discussions about those games? Enter Tales from the Backlog. Hi, I'm Dave Jackson, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest to break down those games that may be stuck in your ever-expanding backlog. Each episode looks at one game in depth, focusing on mechanics, story, music, and other aspects with no spoilers until a clearly marked spoiler wall in the middle. If you've played the game, go ahead and climb that spoiler wall and enjoy in-depth story discussions, and if not, jump out when we warn you and maybe go play that game for yourself. We have over 100 episodes in the feed, everything from Disco Elysium to Tunic to discussion episodes about how to get into horror games, and if games actually need to be fun, or if they have more to offer. I guarantee that there's something in there for everybody. Once again, that's Tales from the Backlog, available wherever your podcasts are found.
Do you feel like you're the only person in your circle who wants to go deep about video games regularly?
We were like that too. Until now.
Welcome to Crossplay Conversations, the brand new bi-weekly topical video game podcast from Luke Lewis,
Joseph Hooper,
And Jacob McCord.
with many years of breaking it down separately on shows like the Left Behind Game Club, Player Podcast, and Lukewarm Games, the gang is finally coming together to publish their gaming group chat in audio form every other week.
Expect roundtable reviews of the latest games, profiles of upcoming indies, and insightful conversations about essential topics in the video game industry. All with a mostly positive, insightful, and fun style.
Help us out by subscribing on your podcast platform of choice to get the first episodes delivered straight to your feed.
And follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos for updates about the show.
Cheers and happy gaming.
were you surprised? I know I might be skipping ahead here, but were you surprised when you found out who or what the psycho was? And please help me set up how we find out.
Was I surprised? Truthfully, I mean, a little bit. Like, there's definitely a little bit of a shock reveal to it. I think from the get-go, I was kind of like, why would Josh invite everybody to the mansion when they were basically all in on his sister's disappearing? You know, even if he didn't even if he didn't blame them, like they were still part of it. It's like a very bizarre decision. And he's like hamming up about it, and the whole time I'm just thinking like, this makes no sense.
Yeah. But you didn't really see it coming.
I did. No, I guess not.
The Josh twist.
I guess not.
Yeah. Which, again, we find out, again, our friends Chris and Ashley get captured, and they have a gun on a table, and they essentially are given a choice again where Chris either has to shoot himself or shoot Ashley, and one of them has to live and one of them has to die. Lo and behold, there's blanks in the gun. So regardless if you shoot yourself, if you shoot Ashley, or if you do not shoot, you find out that, you know, there are blanks in the gun because Josh is actually the psycho, and he wants to your point, the thing that didn't make sense now makes sense, where he wants to inflict pain and suffering on everyone that were there when his sisters passed away. He's a deeply unsettled man. Is that fair to say?
I think it is fair to say that he has suffered extreme trauma and grief, and that has caused mental wellness issues with Josh. And I mean, we've sort of skipped I think a kind of important chunk of the game where Matt goes through the sanatorium. Sanatorium.
Mike goes through the sanatorium.
See, they're so awful. I forget their names. Mike goes through the sanatorium, and he sort of discovers like the bit about all of the miners, and then I think it's Chris and Ashley who uncover a lot of the evidence that point to Josh having, like, you know, seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist, you know, being medicated, going through, like, I think he had like he was at a like rehabilitation center, and then everything sort of comes to a head at this like gun decision. Yes,
exactly. Throughout the game, I think it's fair to say that much like many of the other games in the Supermassive catalog, you will collect clues in the environment, and the clues are sort of subdivided in Until Dawn in a couple of different categories. Like, some of them are the mystery man, and some of them are the miners, and there are others that we'll get to shortly, but they're each divided that way. And like you said, you discover clues as you go. There are also totems, which we haven't really explained, where essentially throughout the environment you will find indigenous totems because you're on stolen land, surprise, in southern Alberta, and on this stolen land there are a bunch of totems that will provide you a glimpse into what will happen later in the game, whether it is a fortune, which is like there are 25 of them total, 5 in each categories, where fortune is like, hey, you might want to know about this thing that you'll get a glimpse of like 2 seconds of gameplay that will give you a hint to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't do this thing. Or a lost totem where it's like, hey, this is how one of your characters is absolutely going to die, so like look out for it. But yes, to your point, you gather clues, which they really get ham-fisted in the 5 minutes before you discover that Josh is the psycho. By being like, hey, wait a second. Who's this rich person going to rehab? Hey, wait a second. Who's playing this tape that sounds like Josh, but it's actually a dub with an audio effect? They get really ham-fisted in the last 3 minutes. Right,
and this is where like you sort of start to play like the second part of the game, right? Where Mike is obviously very mad because he thinks Josh killed Jess, and Josh claims to have no memory of killing Jess, but is kind of questioning himself. And then the next mystery sort of begins.
Which the next mystery is sort of interesting because there's, like you said, there's teases of it, and there's like other characters that you see. So there's like a miner that you see like in the game, and you're like, hey, is it actually like this miner who has a flamethrower that's actually the problem and the person that's trying to come after everyone? And even when like the radio tower is cut, when Matt and Emily are at the top of it, and like sort of falls into the mines, you see a hand sort of cut the rope and the wire, but the hand is clearly not a human hand.
And see, I don't know. Maybe I was not paying enough attention, but like I didn't actually catch that.
It was a small baby hand, basically. Yeah.
But so after this moment though with Josh and the gun and realizing, oh, like Josh is he's not well.
Yep.
They go upstairs, and that's when Mr. Flamethrower Man comes over, and he's like, "You kids gotta go."
Yeah. For reasons.
For reasons.
And these reasons are that there is an ancient evil that is running havoc around this property. Mm-hmm. Wendigos. Mm-hmm. Did you know about Wendigos before this game?
I did.
Can you tell me about Wendigos?
I'm going to butcher this.
Great. We'll fill in the blanks.
Wendigos are like an indigenous folklore, like monster out of folklore, where they're sort of the like lost souls of humans. So with the miners, that they sort of explain how the miners turn to cannibalism, and through cannibalism, it sort of unleashes this like ancient... I want to say aura, but like ancient
evil
through the Wendigos, and like the, you know, these poor miners who were dealt like a really heinous hand. Eventually are overtaken by, you know, the Wendigo spirit and become Wendigos themselves, which are these like gangly, basically impenetrable monsters. Like their skin is described as being like virtually unharmable, where like they're like a suit of armor, but they have no skin, just big teeth.
Big teeth
and big legs and big arms
and skinny gangly,
model proportions.
Yeah. But unlike some other mystical creatures, they aren't like vampires or werewolves where if they bite you, you become a Wendigo. It's very much you become a Wendigo by consuming the flesh of another Wendigo. So really, you know, you're not really going to become one unless you're just a hungry miner who just needs to eat.
Not the flesh of another human.
Yes, sorry, the flesh of another human being.
Yeah. But fun fact, Wendigos are one of the rumored theories behind Yellow Jackets. And that's where the first time I heard about Wendigos, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're in the Yellow Jackets rabbit holes, huh?
Oh, yes. I like reading the theories. I like trusting the random Reddit people with their thoughts.
So we discover they're Wendigos, and that's sort of when this game goes from one that relies just a little bit on QuickTime events to a game that just basically in the last, like, I want to say 2 hours just really becomes like a QTE fest, where you discover that there are Wendigos in several places on the property. And since they have not, and keep me honest here, since they've not eaten a ton, they're just ravenous, right?
That's fair.
And they discover and see people through movement. So if you're not moving, the Wendigos don't see you. If you're moving, they honestly have like what looks like a heat vision but it's for vision. When someone moves, you're white. And essentially for the last 2 hours, you are trying to get off the property. Your characters are sort of doing it in a couple of different ways to try and get off, whether it's by sending a signal off the ski resort or the mansion property. You want to get to the ski lodge by finding a key. And other characters just really suggest like, hey, maybe we should just like stay in the basement and not do anything, which would have been the smartest thing to do. I don't know how you felt. Stay in the basement, kids.
No, I think I yelled that out at one point of they're all together in a safe room that's, you know, kind of surrounded by like gate. I mean, that's not really explained either why like the basement of the resort is like full of like locked.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it felt like the basement of like a police office or something. A police office a police station.
But also it almost felt like an underground city in certain ways, where like there's tunnels between
Those other parts, like the parts that like connected to like the sanatorium or whatever, for sure. Like that was a little bit bizarre. Like that's full just like game logic.
Yeah.
But like the caged rooms and like all of that stuff. Like why is that there?
Yeah. And then there's a mine underneath this like mansion, which I mean like maybe you could say like, yes, at one point it was a mine, and then they needed a healthcare facility, and then the rich just bought this stolen land and built a mansion on top of it. But
and this is where for me like the game sort of start to felt like they had 3 different ideas for this like one game, and they just sort of like mashed them all together.
Yeah, they try to do Scream. They try to do like a psychological not a psychological, but like a mystical beast sort of slasher flick. And then I don't know what the third idea is. It's Wendigo, it's Josh's killer, and it's these teens all have drama with each other.
That's fair.
Yeah. But isn't that every like horror movie with teenagers in it?
I suppose.
They all sleep with each other and
Maybe
they all have drama.
2 games.
Maybe it's 2 games. But it's 2 games that are like, that ideas are just smashing together.
Yeah.
This is when the thing about Supermassive games about Until Dawn is that any one of your characters at a lot of points are at risk of being killed. We lost a few of our characters.
We did.
And I think that every time it was my fault.
It was.
Do you want to maybe walk through how I was a dummy and made us lose our characters each time? Because then we can sort of talk about the
I mean, I
end
think
of the
the first death we can both take credit for it.
Okay.
So at one point in time later on in the game, you learn that Jess is alive and she didn't die through this like fall through the mine shaft that you witness.
No, Jess was taken by a Wendigo.
Jess is taken by Wendigo, but then remember, like, she wakes up at the bottom of the mine.
Yes.
And Mike sees her and he's like, oh, you're dead.
Yeah. She looks
See ya.
rough.
Yeah, she's not in good shape.
Yeah.
But turns out she's alive. And who finds her? I think
Matt finds her.
Matt finds her
after falling into the mines, finds her, and they start to try and like make their way out of the mines, out of this underground mine. And you're basically confronted by a Wendigo very fast.
Yep.
And there's a couple different ways that you can tackle QTEs. Some of the QTEs are very much like push a series of buttons in a very fast sequence. Because the DualShock 4 had, for the first time, gyro features, or for the second time, but like more precise gyro features. Obviously, all of Sony's first-party games had to cram that feature in. So there's a QTE that basically don't move. So essentially, you cannot move the controller. If you move it even a touch,
a millisecond,
then you fail the QTE. And
I think you had a great strategy for doing that.
Yeah, I held my breath every time that there was a don't move.
Yeah,
and it
smart.
worked out for me every time.
It really did, though.
Thank God I swam and have that lung capacity despite my asthma. But I think we just fail a QTE on that one?
I don't think it was a QTE. I don't remember the decision that led to Jess's death, but that was like, I don't think that was also like, oh no, I do remember. Okay. So my strategy with the game, as is all horror movie games, is like, I'm going to be a wimp and I'm going to hide if it's given the option. And Jess, you're confronted with the option of either hiding or running. And she's in like 1 out of 10 health conditions. And I think we chose run.
Well, because I wasn't thinking, and after the fact, I was really mad at myself.
Wait a second.
Yeah, I was mad at myself a lot of it. I was holding the sticks, and like the thought should have been, Wendigos see movement, they don't see non-movement, but instead we sent Jessica running, and the Wendigo just like took its like clawy little hand, shoved it in her mouth, and pulled off her bottom jaw.
Yeah, it was gross.
Which was absolutely disgusting. Matt made it out.
And then the next death I think was Ashley's. Who again, like I think
My fault.
No, I think that's a little. I know. Again, I think that's kind of like both of us. Like I think as soon as Ashley is wandering with the group, and convenient, they all get separated in one way or other. And Ashley,
the group is Sam, Chris, Emily, Mike.
I think Mike has already
Ashley?
left at that point because Mike goes back to try and find the Mike goes back to try and find the
key that Josh had.
Yeah.
But there's 4 people in this group.
Yes. So while they're on their way, Ashley hears what she thinks is Jess screaming.
Yep.
And the game does sort of do an interesting job of sort of like overlapping some moments. Like there's a moment earlier in the game where you're hearing some of an interaction between, at that time, the psycho and Sam. In this instance, Ash hears what she thinks to be Jess screaming. So you have the option to either save her or stay with the group. And I think at that point we had learned like the game tends to reward virtue.
Yep.
And being good to your Swedish group of teenage friends.
Yep.
So we went to go and save Jess. And I think as soon as the scene loaded, I was like, fuck. Wendigos can, like, you learn that at one point that
Wendigos
the
can mimic humans to essentially draw humans in.
And I knew immediately as soon as we chose it.
Yeah. And you're basically like stuck on that rail or that path. Once you decide you're going down, there's actually, we watched some of the deaths after the fact, and you basically come upon like this latch that you open and it's like a trap door, and that's where you think Jessica's hiding, and that's when a Wendigo literally decapitates you.
And even if you close it, there's one other.
Even if you don't, if you walk away from it, the Wendigo just like slams it open and cuts your head off anyway.
Yeah.
So
bye, Jess.
we lost Ash. We lost Ash in that way, and then did we lose Emily too?
At the end. So I think before the end, it was Jess, then Ash, and then kind of everybody else right at the end.
The sort of ultimate, or the way the game ends is you get all of the Wendigos. Everyone makes their way to
I don't know that getting the Wendigos together is a choice. You don't
know. Everyone basically ends up in the cabin again with all of the Wendigos that are awake and hungry, chasing after them.
Yeah.
Whether it's through the sanatorium from the basement, whether it's from outside, the house is now full of Wendigos.
Full of Wendigos. What I don't understand is why they were fighting with each other.
Yeah, that's one thing that I also didn't understand.
Like mid-air colliding, like ripping each other's heads off.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like a hunger thing of like, I'm gonna eat these kids, not you.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it was.
Competition between them. But basically you end up in the cottage once more, and it's full of Wendigos, and your thought is like, oh no, we need to escape. And so you sneak around, you have a bunch of don't move sort of QTEs, and Mike, who we haven't talked about, basically is the savior of this entire group. Without Mike, all these dumb kids don't get anything done. This man solves all problems.
Yeah,
he discovers a white dog at one point.
Wolf.
He's a wolf, a white wolf.
Even though you called him Doggo, he's a wolf.
He's my doggo. I pet him, and he was a good boy. But you make your way through the sanatorium all the way, and all of these miners are Wendigos, but are like chained up inside of jail cells. And you have, no joke, with like a buckshot shotgun or with a sawed-off shotgun, like 12 different like sets of QTEs where you're just shooting all of them. Mm-hmm. He's a real hero.
He really, I don't want to say that he redeemed himself.
Yeah, he definitely didn't. But he carried the group.
He did carry the group. This is true.
And so he gets the bright idea by looking at Sam as well, by basically saying like, hey, a bunch of them just fought and just knocked out the gas line for the fireplace conveniently. So there's gas just flooding into the house. So why don't I break this light bulb? When I do break this light bulb, you, Sam, go and turn on the light. And when you do that, there'll be a spark that'll light up the whole house and kill these Wendigos. Mm-hmm. So we did it the bad way.
You did it the bad way.
I did it the bad way, where the ideal way to go about this, if you're playing the game, is all these Wendigos get into the house, and you essentially have to let every one of your friends sneak out of the house, whereas Sam, you like lure the Wendigos away from them to essentially like run, hide, don't move, run, hide, don't move till everyone gets out. You flip a light switch.
I mean, we say that like it would have been easy, but like I think that's also that would have been a challenge too.
Yeah,
like the don't move is so sensitive,
and there's no safe scumming in this game, which you didn't really know when I explained what safe. You're like, what is safe scumming?
No,
but you can't even like go back. You can go back and look at chapters, so you can start back at the beginning of a chapter, but Really, the intention is for you to stick with your playthrough.
Which you can't do in the quarry either until you finish your first playthrough.
Yep.
Right, and then you get that option. So
what we did is we basically
consequences, which is nice.
We either save Mike, who's cornered by Wendigo, or we just flip the light switch and hope for the best. I've played this game before, but I clearly didn't remember that like flipping the light switch kills everyone inside the house, and so
except for Sam.
So we just lit up Mike and we lit up Emily in the house. So at the end of the game, we were left with 3 characters. We were left with Sam, we were left with Chris, and we were left with Matt.
Yeah,
not a great playthrough.
I wanted to save Mike.
Yep.
When we were given the option,
only because he carried the group.
Oh well, I thought at this point, you know what? Like he's done a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. The man deserves to live.
He deserves to live.
What did you think of the ending? Or the credits? Because basically they run a bunch of police interviews that sort of the characters get to discover what happened to their colleagues. Did you like that?
I didn't love it.
Okay.
I didn't hate it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like I felt this way kind of in the quarry as well, where sometimes some of the evidence that you find is sort of useless.
Mm-hmm.
Like doesn't feel like it contributes to an ending, and it doesn't impact the outcome. And I could be wrong, but that's sort of where I feel like that's lacking, right? Like where obviously like the evidence that you find that like fills in the context of the lore and who are the miners and what are Wendigos, like that makes sense. But like you'll pick up a random thing and it'll be like evidence number 10, psychiatric like record, but it doesn't actually bear, like it doesn't really matter.
It almost seems like the middle between, because the quarry had basically this podcast in the credits where they just like unveil a bunch of stuff.
Oh my god, the podcast that never ended. Did you listen to it?
No, it was too much. So I'm like, the quarry wasn't enough. The podcast was too much.
Yeah.
It almost needs to be like almost the quarry, but I just want more of the evidence that we've gathered to be brought into it.
Well, and what was interesting too is when we went back and were so angry about killing half the group in like the last 15 seconds of the game. You go back and obviously like you see how everybody else can die and you watch like, the best ending. And it seemed like all of their testimony was also the same.
Yeah.
Like with a little bit of added bits in, it's just kind of cut down. But like ultimately, like what Sam says to the police is the same, and what Matt says to the police is the same.
Mm-hmm. I really, and this game came out way before the quarry, but I appreciate the quarry's like director's cut mode where you can go through the bits that you want to replay, whereas this one is very much like chapter, because like I said, we tried to, it's split up into 10 chapters, and that chapter brought you back to like I don't want to say an hour, but like probably at least 30 to 45 minutes of gameplay, and I'm just like, I don't want to play this again just to do a 2-minute choice. Let's watch it on YouTube.
I think the other thing for me too is like at the end, we don't really find out who it was that chased Hannah and Beth over the cliff.
I mean, we assume it's Wendigos.
Was it a Wendigo?
We don't know for sure.
I don't know.
Yeah. But it probably wasn't a miner, because the miners were actually like, or the one miner that was alive was basically just like trying to protect others and keep the Wendigos at bay with his flamethrower.
Oh, and we glazed over Hannah and Beth becoming Wendigos.
Do you want to hit on that?
So at some point in the game, you get to play as Josh, and Josh is sort of having this like big like breakdown. He's having this like big mental breakdown, and he's hallucinating and envisioning things. And then while you're in this like lower level of the mines, you come across a Wendigo who's got the same tattoo as either Hannah or Beth. So you realize that once they fell off the cliff, they succumbed to,
because their bodies were never found.
Their bodies were never found. And then there's just a couple loose ends for me, and I don't know, maybe I just like when you find again, I can't remember if it's Hannah or Beth because they're twins. The one who's buried in the mines, right?
Yeah, I don't
remember that moment.
Yeah, I do.
And they find her cell phone.
And then there's also another point in the game where underneath one of the cabins you find one of their cell phones as well. So there's stuff's around. But
who buried her?
We don't know. We don't know.
There?
We don't know. How? Could it have been the miner that was like savagely decapitated by a Wendigo? potentially. But yeah, I guess loose ends.
Some loose ends.
Mm-hmm.
Some loose ends that like I would have loved to have seen like kind of wrapped up into what we had learned.
Would love to know, like,
Was it a Wendigo that pushed them off the cliff? I don't know.
We'll never know. What'd you think of Until Dawn, like, as a whole? Is it worthwhile to play for people that are like on the fence? That, I mean, most of the people that have played it have probably like listened to this, but like, what are your overall thoughts?
I mean, I liked it. I think there are, some small issues with it. I think they sort of took what they learned with Until Dawn and made a better version of it, which ends up being the Quarry. But again, I think, the performances are much better, are pretty good in the game. And some of the moments are pretty scary for sure. I think the quick time events, like I think for the most part, everything's also pretty fair, right? Like, it's not like choose left or right and you're, fucked if you choose left instead of right. Like there's sort of a way forward in the game, regardless of which way you choose, unless you're following Jess to save her. Don't make that decision. But no, I thought it was a fun game. I thought it had some good, jump scares and some good moments. And I think, did it need both the combination of Josh and the Wendigos? Was that maybe too much for one game? I don't know.
They try to bite off a lot.
Yeah, they bite off a lot with the game and the story.
You liked it.
I did.
I also liked it. I really like this style of game, and I think Supermassive is like in rarefied company now. That like Telltale doesn't really. What is Telltale in 2024 when you're listening to this? I don't know. But they're in rarefied company where there are very few companies that make games like this, and I just appreciate that. Despite having issues with the Dark Pictures series at times, and despite this game and the Quarry, the writing at times being like, I mean, look, I don't know what I'm expecting. It's like a horror movie.
I think the Quarry was much more predictable.
Yeah.
Right, and I appreciated the twist in this game more.
But I like this video game.
Yes.
I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But maybe we were wrong. I'm just going to read off 2 reviews from the internet. First, I want to read off a little extract from a review.
Bad?
No, this has a 79 average on Metacritic.
What are we wrong about?
Maybe people loved it more than we did.
We liked it.
The Telegraph gave it an 8 out of 10 and said the horror movie the game reminds me most of is Joss Whedon's The Cabin in the Woods, not from a narrative sense, you understand, but in the way it lampoons the genre while never losing sight of what bloody good fun it can be.
Sure.
And that review came from Tom Hoggins, and then I'll read a small extract or a small piece from the Game Informer review, which was a 9 out of 10. That's from Jeff Marchiafava, and Jeff ends up saying for this one. Sorry, I scrolled away from it. The script kept me entertained and feeling like my decisions mattered throughout my 10-hour playthrough.
Yeah.
Thanks to some good twists, a few fake-outs, and limitless jump scares, Until Dawn would make a solid horror film. As a piece of interactive fiction, however, it's a remarkable experience that horror fans shouldn't miss. Again, from 2015.
Ooh, raving review.
Yeah, raving review. It's very good. And at the time, good game. There weren't, like, beyond what Telltale did, there weren't many games like this.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I super appreciate it. I guess the one thing we just didn't cover really quickly is that the psychiatrist, we end up finding out that you're actually Josh sitting in the seat, like answering those questions, and Josh is the one that's receiving, psychiatric help from the character played by Peter Stormare, which I think was also like a nice little like fun twist to it as well.
No, yeah, I agree.
And those sequences really shift from like you being asked questions first person to like the doctor really trying to like keep Josh from like losing his mind completely, which was a nice shift.
Totally agree.
Any final thoughts about Until Dawn?
No, I liked it. I think, calling back to my original pitch, it's, the band season of Punk'd, right?
Yep. Good.
You get it now? Because if you remember that scene, like Josh also, it's not necessarily clear that he's bringing everyone there to murder them, right? He's there to
make himself feel better,
to make himself feel better,
and make others feel
and
like
to scare them.
Yeah,
but not necessarily murder them.
No.
And in the end, you also have Mike and Chris who are on Josh's side and who go back to save him and try to help him. And unfortunately, he does become a Wendigo.
Except in our playthrough where a Wendigo literally crushes his head in a body of water.
I feel like that is... I think that's got to be like the canon.
Him becoming a Wendigo?
Him becoming a Wendigo.
Yeah, I would agree.
Right.
Yep.
So, the family reunites.
Those were our thoughts about Until Dawn, a great video game by Supermassive Games. If you enjoyed this podcast, do us 3 favors. The first, give us a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice because it truly helps. 5 stars on Spotify, 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. And Jessica, if they want to give us 3 stars, what do you say?
No.
Yeah, that's it. The second thing is send the podcast to a friend because that's how people hear about podcasts. And the third thing is check out the Left Behind Game Club Discord because that's where folks are going to be popping off talking about Until Dawn. You can find the link to that at leftbehindgame.club/Discord. Jessica, if folks want to find you on the internet, can they do that?
No.
Great. Excellent.
You can try to find me on Discord at Jess20, but I'm not there very often.
Great.
That's about it.
Maybe
catch me if you can.
Yeah, so if you're in the Discord, basically we're like going down the funnel of people that will get to you. If you're in the Left Behind Game Club Discord, go in the channel after you've listened to this and just find Jessica and tag her and just say, hey, we loved you on the episode Until Dawn. We want to see more of you.
See you in 3 years.
You can find me on the internet at Jacob McCord on all major social media platforms. I'm on Twitter at Jacob McCord. You can find me on Instagram. I host another show called Crossplay Conversations with friends of the show, Luke Lewis and Joseph Hooper. It's a topical video game podcast. We've been doing it now for almost 6 months. This is wild to say. We are just wrapping up our Game of the Year coverage, which is wild. But check that out if you want to hear smart people talk about video games and have a lot of fun while doing it.
Oh my gosh. Final thoughts. What's your front runner for Game of the Year?
Oh man, so secrets, we're recording this in October of 23. It's going to come out in January of 24.
Cheaters.
Look, at this stage, I don't know. Right now, my favorite game of 2023 is probably Dave the Diver. But part of me feels like I may change that. It won't be Tears of the Kingdom, though.
You'll have to listen to find out.
There you go. Crossplay Conversations on all major podcasting platforms. And I guess we're going to end the show there. Shout out Mike Ruffalo. And that, my friends, is one less game left behind.
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun. Whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen,
And I am Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
and on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there, so we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.